This starts a very sad trend. The President, Muhammadu Buhari, has ordered a probe into alleged security breach inside the presidential villa. This was made known today at a statement issued by the President's Senior Special Assistant on Media and Publicity, Balanga Bashehu. There have been reports of gunshots and a breach of security within the presidential villa on Thursday last week. The situation was said to be as a result of a squabble among family members and officials in the presidency. The statement noted that some staff and occupants of the State House have been arrested in relation to the incident. Tundun, Dr. Abati, we started this morning trying to analyze and make sense of it on a very sad note. This is akin to sort of like a coup. It will have been a coup if it was a military era or you didn't know where the shooting was coming from. But we can see this. And this is not the first time. This is not the second time. It's getting one too many. A lot of people say the president can't handle his home.
Clearly not. And for me, this is the importance of keeping your election campaign promises. He did say he was not going to have a first lady, did he not? And that was a crowd pleaser, because at the time, newspaper headlines were full of the antics and excesses of former President Goodluck Jonathan's first lady, Patience. So when President Buhari promised Nigerians he was not going to have a first lady, it went down really well with the Nigerian public. But we can see that he reneged on that promise. And this is embarrassing. I understand Mrs. Buhari to a certain extent. In my home, I call the shots. What I say goes. I'm the queen of all I survey. So it must be frustrating for her to not be able to give orders in her own home as she's the head of the home on the domestic side. So, but the fact of the matter is, we always have to look at the benefits and the burdens of whatever situation we find ourselves in. That is not her home, essentially. Yes. They're the present occupants. That home belongs to Nigeria. Yeah. Come 2023, another first lady will be there. Definitely. So really, she shouldn't have that kind of possessiveness to it. There needs to be a level of detachment. And as we were saying earlier with regards to June 12th, I remember when my father died, I couldn't come home and bury my dad. I lived in England at the time, because it was decided that there was no point in flying the children home, because it was not going to be that kind of family funeral. We would have gotten nowhere near my dad's grave, because it was a public figure. Yeah. So she also has to understand that as the first lady or the wife of the president, that is not your home in the same sense that my home is mine. And this kind of behavior is embarrassing. It just is embarrassing. And it reflects badly on her husband. It's not his fault to the extent that it's not him that's guilty of these excesses, but it makes him look bad. We all have embarrassing relatives that when they do and say certain things, you know, face palm, you know, but it's not our fault, but they do make us look bad. And she needs to rein in some of this behavior. There was no need to have anybody shooting.
Well, I mean,
the circumstances
the State House is a security zone. And so if you have anybody shooting carelessly around the place in order to resolve a disagreement, you could cause serious panic. Yes. That's one. Two, the place is not under the control of the wife of the president. There are protocols in place for the management of the villa, for the security processes. And even if anybody travels and that person is supposed to self-isolate, I do not think that it is the duty of the wife of the president to be the one to be giving directives, to be acting, to borrow your phrase, as the COVID police. And for her to have even gone ahead to be giving directives to the Inspector General of Police and also the agencies of government, and demanding that the guidelines that have been given by the president must be enforced. Now, that's beyond her. It's not part of her function. Now, I think, however, you know, there's been a history to this. She's always been under pressure, and she had raised concerns in the past about how a clique had emerged in that presidential villa, doing the bidding of persons who are not the president of Nigeria. So this may be, again, an extension of that. But in terms of optics, it doesn't look tidy at all. As you have pointed out, it makes it look as if the president cannot control his own domestic space. And that's how people have been interpreting it. However, I think it's useful that the president himself has ordered an investigation, and that where a breach or a misdemeanor is confirmed, then the person should be appropriately sanctioned. We hope, of course, that the Inspector General of Police will do what needs to be done and get to the root of the matter. Because really, when you look at it, it looks really bad. However, there is one point that Garuba Shehu made in the statement that was issued to the effect that, look, nobody should use this to play politics, to criticize the because has not done anything wrong. This is just a situation that developed. And I hope that that's a very good point to make. He also assured us that, look, it wasn't as if there was a coup, that the president is safe, and that what happened did not happen anywhere close to him. Because if it had been around the president himself, and then, of course, by now, some people must be in detention, truly, you know, because that would be a threat to the president, because the security of the president cannot be taken lightly. He being the flag bearer of, the presidential system.
We're going to a quick break now. And that's all we can take on the headline news. We'll take a short break now. When we return, we'll have the trio of Rotus, Odiri, Michael Wilson, Aaron Akerjil to give us updates on African business and COVID-19. Stay with us. But let's be careful about transient things. It's really important.
Welcome back to the morning show here on Arise News. Our dependable Rotus Odiri is now here to give us Africa Business Update. Good morning, Rotus. Over to you.
Good morning.
Good morning, Doctor. Good morning, Tundun. Good morning, Rufai. Yes, so the African Business Update is being dominated by the NNPC. In an effort to show transparency, in an effort to be forthcoming with the Nigerian public, the Group Managing Director, Melek Kyari, has signed off on some financials, performances for 2018 for pretty much all the NNPC subsidiaries. We're starting, first of all, with NAPIMS, the National Petroleum Investment Management Services. They had revenue of, this is again 2018, revenue of 5.04 trillion naira, 54% higher than what they recorded in 2017. Cost of sales, 2.06 trillion naira, 24.85% up from where they were in 2017. Gross profits of 2.97 trillion naira, 85% increase from 2017. Profits after tax of 1 trillion naira. They had a loss in the previous year of 2017 of 1.64 trillion naira in 2017. And it's interesting, if you look at the I just want us to stay here for a little moment now. Under recovery of 809 billion naira is what was spent. It was a 436% increase from the prior year. When you want to talk about profitable subsidiaries of the NNPC, NAPIMS, the National Petroleum Investment Management Service, so far, looking at 2018 financials, is one of the shining lights. Again, we have to see what kind of performance they put forward in 2019, but this is very, very encouraging. We move on now to the PPPMC, which is the Petroleum Products Managing Company. They posted revenues of 29.5 billion naira versus the 2017 year. That was 54% down from what they put forward in 2017. They also recorded cost of sales of 5.2 billion naira. This was good. They managed their costs from 2017 to 2018, so that came down. Gross profit, 24.3 billion naira, 6% up. Profits after tax of 9.5 billion naira. They had a loss in the prior 2017 financial year of 27 billion naira. Let's stick here as well for a second. Looking at under recovery in the prior slide, I was looking at some costs that jumped out at me. For the PPMC, it was the consultancy fees that they paid. 1 billion naira in consultancy fees, 569% increase in the prior year. But still, if you look at their performance for the 2017 financial year, they were profitable. So that's good. So again, NAPIMS posted profitable performance and PPMC posted a profitable performance for the financial year 2018. So that's the good. And some other subsidiaries also looked at provided some profitable performance. But now we get to the ugly part. There's the good, the bad, and the ugly. But we jump straight to the ugly. The refineries, starting with the Kaduna refinery. The Kaduna refinery recorded a zero revenue in financial year 2018. They didn't post any revenue at all. So automatically, Cost of sales piles up, 24.6 billion naira cost of sales. That was 73% down from the prior year. The GL is a gross loss. Normally, it's a gross profit, where you subtract your cost of sales from your top-line revenue to get your gross profit. It was 24 billion naira loss. They had a even larger loss in 2017, 90.3 billion naira loss in 2017, and then loss after tax of 64 billion naira and a loss of 118 billion. Now, look, the Kaduna refinery is paying salaries. I mean, they had salaries and wages of 9.3 billion naira versus 9.9 in 2017. Two costs that jumped out. I wasn't able to put that up here, but obsolete inventory. They made an allowance for obsolete inventory in 2018 to the tune of 183 million naira. In 2017, it was 4.4 billion, the amount of money that they made provisions for obsolete inventory. They also had assets under construction that have been written off. That was to the tune of 8.9 billion. There was no figure for that in 2017. So the Kaduna refinery, unfortunately, is showing some losses. I didn't put up Warri and Port Harcourt, but it was pretty much a similar story. Although Warri did have revenues of 1.9 billion naira in 2018. That was 58% up from the previous year. Port Harcourt posted revenues of 1.4 billion naira, which was like 70% down from what they posted in 2017. The key story here, folks, is that one has to ask themselves, again, going back, we commend Mele Kyari for being transparent and signing off on these financials. He was at a talk, a video conferencing talk, where he said that the reason why the refineries haven't been sold is probably a strategic problem. But one has to ask about the viability of the Kaduna refinery if the NNPC is looking at selling it off later on. You have to think about its location all the way up north compared to the other refineries, Warri and Port Harcourt, that are in the Niger Delta, that are close to the seaports. Look at Dangote Refinery. His refinery is located here in Lagos at the Lekki Free Trade Zone. Next to a seaport, he's going to be able to refine crude. Whatever is used for domestic production, domestic consumption for you and I will be supplied here. The rest of it will be sent out through the seaports and exported. For Kaduna's refinery, you got to pipe the oil all the way, crude all the way up there. Then you've got to now pipe it back down outside of your domestic production. You've got to now pipe it back down again to the south in order to export it, whatever it is that is produced. Again, looking at these numbers, they are very, very troubling, and one has to wonder about the viability of the Kaduna refinery. But again, another thing is we want to see the 2019 financials for all of these subsidiaries. We want to see how they've been doing. But again, it's kudos to Mele Kyari, Group Managing Director of the NNPC, for putting forward these figures. Hopefully, we'll see more transparency from the NNPC. But again, I stress, NAPIMS is doing at least going by 2018, doing pretty well. If you want to talk about which subsidiaries of the NNPC will be, floated on the stock exchange for corporate governance purposes, you have to look at the profitable ones like in NAPIMS or the PPMC. But the refineries, it's a struggle tale for them. Yes, go ahead.
Rotus, I want to ask a question, because when I saw the reports out of the Kaduna refinery, I was shell-shocked. And I also remember that there's a company called NLNG that does gas, yes, that has been a poster child for everything good about Nigeria.
Yes.
What is it that NLNG is doing so well that the Kaduna refinery cannot learn from? Because I don't get it.
Sounds like it's a white elephant project. I'm sorry.
It does. I mean, the thing is, again, if you look at the profits from NAPIMS, it's from selling crude and gas. Same thing with NLNG, is mostly been selling of gas. Their operations they're run pretty well. NLNG had Chika Umbonu, Arise business analyst, on the Global Business Report. We looked at some of when they are signing off on Train 7, which is supposed to produce more gas down the line for the country and bring in more revenue. It's a well-run subsidiary, and it's been paying off dividends, to the nation. It's been run very well. Unfortunately, we just haven't seen that transferred over to the refineries. And again, the location problem for the Kaduna refinery especially is an issue. But even Warri and Port Harcourt that are down south in the Niger Delta, even though they posted revenues, they still ended up with losses. It was a loss after tax for Warri to the tune of 44 billion naira, loss after tax for Port Harcourt to the tune of 45 billion naira. So they all recorded losses. But at least Warri and Port Harcourt, they sold something at top-line revenue.
Well, Rotus, can I come in here? I think it's good that the example of the Nigeria LNG was brought up by Rufai, which has a very good business model and which is a very profitable enterprise for the Nigerian government. What I think that Mele Kyari, the GMD of the NNPC, needs to worry about when he talks about adopting a new strategy, a new framework for the 3 refineries. I think that government should just pull out as much as possible out of the refineries process. He referred to the Dangote refinery, which we expect will be producing up to about 50,000 barrels per day. Now, can we use that privatization model or the Nigeria LNG model to get these refineries to keep functioning, to become effective? Nigeria produces crude oil, but we're net importer of the same product. So it doesn't quite make sense. So when it talks about strategy or new framework, these are some of the things that they should be looking at. And then direct sale, direct purchase, all of that existing template would need to be reworked. However, for the first time in 10 years, NNPC is publishing its audited financial accounts. And of course, when Mele Kyari assumed office, he had warned that, look, he met, when he assumed office, about 65 unaudited financial accounts between 2011 and 2014 alone. And now he promised 10 months ago that he will make sure that going forward, audited financial accounts are published. And he has kept his promise. In line also with what he told the executive secretary of NEITI, Waziri Adio, when he visited him 10 months ago. So it's good to see that here in NNPC, we have a man who keeps his promise. And it's good that the information is available online, open data. All of that will encourage transparency, definitely.
Yes, indeed. And again, as you just said, very commendable on his part. Moving on from oil and gas to transport, the national president of the Public Transport Owners of Nigeria Association said that the sector has lost about 200 billion naira due to the lockdown over the last 3 months. This is a harbinger of what we are possibly going to see with our Q2 numbers for different sectors of the economy when those figures are finally released. They were lamenting the fact that the interstate travel needs to be resumed as soon as possible. They've been losing lots of money with regards to them not being able to engage in economic activity, and they are feeling the pinch. Of course, the continued balance here is look at all these buses now. This is old footage, of course. We know we want to, of course, hope that there's social distancing in most of these public transportation vehicles. But that is the balance. Look at the United States, California, Arizona, Florida. Since reopening the economies, they've seen some increases in COVID-19 cases. So, how do you now balance that with reopening of interstate travel for the transport sector? But they have to survive. I mean, what are they going to do? It's a really, really tough call here. But again, 200 billion naira, that's what they've estimated that they've lost over the last 3 months due to the lockdown. They want to get back to moving Nigerians up and down. But, of course, the issue, of course, is, how do you now balance that with social distancing? And, of course, what might happen if we continue to see a rise in cases across the country? And
then, Rotus, we've run out of time.
Thank you very much, Rotus.
All right, thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Now we're off to London to join Michael Wilson for our Global Business Update. Good morning, Mr. Wilson.
Good morning. Asian shares tumbled, really. Oil prices down. Very underwhelming data out of China. But it's Magic Monday here in the UK. We're hoping that the opening of the shops will bring consumers back and spending money, because that's really what is going to start getting things going again, we hope. China, underwhelming, as I said. Industrial production, 4.4%. The consensus estimate was 5%, so they've come in slightly under what people were hoping for. But bearing in mind the previous level was 3.9. I know these are only a very, very tiny percentage points, all the rest of it, but it gives an idea that it's going to be a fairly long, hard road, I would imagine, a pretty slow bounce back, quite honestly. And I'm expecting that economists will probably take a similar view over other economies around the world. Now, as you know, equity markets took an absolute hammering on Thursday, didn't they? As a number of US states said that they had got more coronavirus cases, and that sort of helped. That really went across a lot of the markets, and that certainly lasted well into Friday, as you know. We were talking about that then. So where are we going now then? I mean, the virus, when it was actually spreading like wildfire, a lot of traders were very worried that the lockdowns would actually halt the global economy. And the health crisis was, to all intents and purposes, a bit of an unknown. The hope is now that health authorities have a slightly better idea of having to cope with a second spike, if indeed they do. Looks like there's a second spike in Beijing as well, which is not good news. The even worse news is it seems to have come from a food market, but more on that as more details actually emerge. So let me take you through a general view about the markets. They don't move in straight lines. They never have. We saw that bullish surge in April after the negative oil price, and then it all turned round. Just wondering if Thursday's sell-off turns out to be a bump in the bullish road, if I can put it like that. Who knows? An occasional jump in infections might become the new normal as far as we know. As I said, Beijing has experienced it. And also the issue, as we know, is an issue for Tokyo as well. The Japanese capital reported 47 new cases. That's the highest level in 1 month. Now, so we could talk really about the kind of safe havens that people have been going to, as they always do in times of problem. And the US dollar has been attracting a lot of attention as a safe haven, even though Jerome Powell was saying last week, again, as we noted, that the US economy is going to be very, very bad through 2020, won't really start to emerge again until maybe 2022, which is a long, long way away. Add that to the World Bank prognostications and the OECD, and I think traders have probably had their fill of bad news, but we'll see. Commodities, gold in good shape. You would imagine it is, because that helped with the US dollar as well. The metal is well above the $1,700 an ounce mark. In fact, a closer play on Friday, it was 2% above its May high, which is its highest level in over 7 years. You touched on oil, as you always do. At the beginning of last week, there was a feeling that it was on the rise again. A bit of cut to production in various countries. It's still hovering around, but there is a bit of optimism about the oil market, but it was hit by a survey, a rig survey. It's a Baker Hughes report, comes out every month in the United States. And there was an indication that fewer rigs were actually in operation. Week ahead, here's some good ones for you. So we've got unemployment here. The rate is going to be very, very high. We saw it is in the United States too. So that's two economies which aren't good. Retail sales in the United States as well. Will people have actually gone back to the shops? That's a big one. That's tomorrow. And also Bank of England. Now, more discussions about negative interest rates. It goes from one side to the other. Maybe we will, maybe we won't. Actually, once you've started doing that, there aren't many tools left in the box. And a bit of cold water has been poured on that by the Deputy Governor of the Bank of England, John Cunliffe, who said that negative interest rates were being examined, but he was worried about the impact that might have on the financial sector. So, as I said, on US and UK retail sales on Thursday, of course, they will be absolutely terrible, which brings us rather neatly onto Magic Monday. So what's happened here is that non-essential shops have been given the go-ahead to go opening. My wife won't like this very much because she is one of those kind of people who goes into a shop, has a look round, walks out, chats with her friends and all that. The whole retail therapy thing, it's not going to be like that at all. You're going to go in, you'll be in a queue, you choose what you want to buy, you take it to a and then you're out straight away. It'll be like that, and it won't be a retail therapy experience. EasyJet, the cheap airline, is resuming internal flights here. Not much progress as far as Brexit's concerned and all those kind of rather boring things. Imagine the poor negotiators. They're having to do this on video screens rather than packing up and sitting down face to face. And finally, I've got one for you, which is this. I think there's going to be, and you should watch out for this, a consolidation of telecom deals. What's happened is the EU's second highest court has ruled against the EC's block on the takeover of O2 by its smaller rival Three. These are telecom networks. The Three is owned by HK conglomerate CK Hutchison, and that may also allow, these are competition rules, it may also allow more consolidation in sectors like steel and so on. That's the global view right now.
Right. Very interesting stuff, Michael. Real quickly, I want to bring to the front burner the issue of the sailors that are stuck on the high sea. I mean, I was hearing a report this morning about them, how it's very difficult for them to get into countries, how the fact that they have products stuck on the high sea that they cannot clear, goods and services they cannot clear that are stuck on the high sea, goods most importantly. I mean, you want to talk through that, and let's try to understand that dynamic, how it works.
Yeah, it works like this, that you've got ships which are coming, which have been held up because of coronavirus regulations, which are now hitting economies where there is no particular consumer demand that we know. I said retail said it's going to be a big one this week, so you've got that. The second thing is that freight rates are at an all-time low, and I think what we're going to see is an enormous amount of competition between freight carriers, which means that there'll be fewer freight carriers, and carrying freight is rather like advertising, is a very important indicator on global trade. We're going to see less global trade. I think supply lines will come into question as well. So in other words, freight rates themselves will become extremely competitive. That's where we're going with that. You're absolutely right. There's everything from clothes to television sets, as far as we know, on the high seas. They're either anchored somewhere or they're proceeding very, very slowly indeed. Spare a thought for the sailors as well, who've probably not been home for 6 or 7 months. You know, so there's all that going on. This is a trade which is, this carriage trade is actually more or less frozen at the moment. But the long-term effect, as I was saying a couple of weeks ago, is that there's going to be a massive price war as far as the carriers are concerned. It is a very important indicator of trade, and I don't see any change to that coming anytime soon.
What do you think of Magic Monday? Do you see it doing the magic? Because the reports are that the Chancellor is thinking of reducing VAT to encourage people to come out and buy.
Right. I think reduction in VAT is expensive. It would be for your economy as well, and it'd be certainly economy for the UK. I think a reduction in VAT would be a very good idea. I've been talking about this with neighbours yesterday as we were sitting socially distanced in our garden in the sunshine, saying, "Are you going to go back shopping?" And as I said, it won't be a very nice experience, but there is the fact, younger people were saying this to me, yes, you know, that they've not been spending money. They've not been going into work. They've not been buying expensive coffees at, you know, expensive coffee shops and all the rest of it. So there is a pent-up demand, but it's really a question of what's going to happen when they get to the shops. I think what we're going to see, number one, is there'll be a big price war. I think companies like Primark and Zara and so on, which you probably know as labels, are going to be fighting to get rid of their stock. At the same time, there are companies now which are saying, you know what, we're not going to go back to shops, we're going to stay online. So I think there'll be a lot of companies, retail companies, having battles with their landlords saying we are not going to pay these rents because we simply can't. Or at least we're not going to have rents levied every quarter, we'll have rents levied every month, and we'll take a view as months go by. What else do you do? A lot of retailers will also be saying, is it worth actually opening? So I think that today it'll be quite important to see what the footfall across these kind of shops are. I'm guessing that tomorrow we have a thing called the British Retail Consortium. I know you have an equivalent in Nigeria, and we'll get figures from them about whether people actually have gone back. I absolutely don't know. I think if people can shop locally, they probably will. As far as going into the big cities, not so sure about that.
Well, thank you very much, Michael Wilson. Maybe tomorrow we'll take up the question I was going to ask you about Brexit and who the deal or no deal situation will favor most, either the EU or the UK. But we'll bring that up tomorrow. Thank you very much. Now, for update on COVID-19 pandemic, Aaron Akrejola is here with us. Aaron, good morning.
Good morning, Doctor.
Good morning, Aaron.
Good morning, Tundun. Lovely neck-piece bath. We're very regal.
It's called the Tundun.
Yeah, okay, it's called the Tundun.
Yeah.
Very cultural, I must say. Good morning, Rufai, on the other side.
Morning, Aaron.
Yes, how are you doing? All right, let's get straight into it. We're starting off from the US today, and we're seeing new cases actually And spike in the U.S., I must say. Of course, without a doubt, U.S. still is the most infected with COVID-19. And we're seeing spikes in places that include the likes of Florida and Texas. Of course, Tulsa, Oklahoma is also experiencing a spike. Alaska, Arizona, Arkansas, California, and North Carolina, Oklahoma, South Carolina. We're seeing some of those major cases, and they're attributing it to the weekend and the gatherings that happened over the Memorial Day holiday. So they are attributing several of these spikes in the U.S. A lot is still going on, and we are hoping that we are not experiencing the second wave, because New York right now are trying to open up and trying to ease restrictions in the hope that the economy gets back to normal. But for the brevity of time, we have so much to actually delve into, and let's actually focus on Africa, because a lot is actually happening in Africa. As a matter of fact, key figures in Africa are being struck with the COVID-19 and actually have died. First of all, in Congo, Pierre Lumbi, of course, a former aide to the former president, Joseph Kabila. Okay, looking at the African figures, there are 242,105, at the number of cases. Last week, it crossed the 200,000 mark, and at the moment, 6,464 number of deaths recorded, while 109,977 of the 242,105 have recovered, which seems to be a good news. But now focusing on Congo. All right, Congo is actually experiencing what some will call a triple whammy. Maybe some are saying even the Pandora box, the proverbial Pandora box, has been opened in Congo, understanding that they are down with measles. Ebola has surfaced again, and coupled up with COVID-19, all right, it's actually almost ravaging Congo aside. And this man, Pierre Lumbi, has actually succumbed to COVID-19 complications at the moment. He was an aide to the former president, Joseph Kabila, so rather unfortunate for him. And moving away from Congo, in Ghana also, the health minister, the presidency yesterday and over the weekend rather, actually announced that the Ghanaian health minister had died of COVID-19 in Ghana. So it's really, really sad. I'm beginning to see several of those things actually play out in this particular continent, although by estimation, when you put it side by side with what is happening across other continents, Africa is still relatively low in the number of cases. But without a doubt, certainly we're seeing these kind of things happen, and eyes and concern is being beamed on Congo at the moment, understanding. Yeah.
Aaron, I'd like to make a comment on Congo.
Yeah.
I mean, it's quite very appalling what is happening in Congo.
Without a doubt.
Because there is no leadership to this effect. I mean, there's a very old smirky saying that says, where logic ends, Congo begins. And it's an indication of what is happening in Congo. And by extension, too, I'll also go to Tanzania. I am shocked that despite the fact that the president of Tanzania has not shown leadership, and speaking of Magufuli, he has not ensured that he brings out constant updates as regards COVID. The shocking thing is that he wants to restart the Tanzanian Football League amidst all of this. He came out recently, Dr. Abati, if you remember, to say that, to give a testimony that COVID had been eliminated in Tanzania. Now he wants to open up the league and allow people come, and allow a lot of people come. And it's going to be a massive spread. And it's not been sincere as regards the state of COVID-19. I hear the story recently that they are shutting the borders. The Kenyans and some other countries are shutting the borders for preventing Tanzanians to come in, because the Tanzanians are bringing a lot of cases of COVID-19 in. So I am shocked that Africa is still not, embracing that sense of leadership we need to have concerning COVID-19. We're treating this with kid gloves. It's very, very, very painful. And I'm making a particular case about Tanzania, most importantly, and about Congo.
Congo, yeah, certainly.
Well, it's not only in Congo that we have had Pierre Lumbi dying. He was also a former senator. He was elected senator. Congo has about 4,747 cases and 107 deaths. And, if leadership is the issue, well, let's also take a look at what has happened in Burundi, where the president, Pierre Nkurunziza, also died as a result of COVID-19 related complications. The report also indicated that his mom and his wife were also affected. They've also been infected. But it would seem that both in Africa and elsewhere, the attitude of the political leadership, to quote Ben Carson, the U.S. neurosurgeon, is that people should just learn to live with the disease. And learning to live with the disease will mean, of course, that many countries will continue to ease lockdown. Even in France, they're going to start opening restaurants. Yeah, in the UK, today is a magic Monday. The shops are going to open, and shop owners are telling the people spend, spend, and spend. And the people are even resisting the use of face masks. So people will just have to take responsibility, whether they are highly placed or they are lowly placed, because what we have seen is that, look, nobody knows when this infection will disappear. I mean, in the US, a professor at the University of Minnesota is saying that, in fact, the infection rate in the US, which is just 5% now, is going to rise to as much as 60% before you can even expect any kind of reduction in the rate of infection. But I hope that the scientists will move faster with the search for vaccine, so that all of us can be in a much safer place everywhere in the world.
Yeah, in regards to Africa, one thing has been the underlying theme here, and if people have not gotten that message, is that you need to actually be self-responsible, because looking towards the government for leadership and direction that would help you, even not just even in Africa, all right, because a lot of people have actually said that in the US and the UK, the government has actually let them down. You need to be responsible for yourself. Now, moving away from this to where it all started, talking about China right now, Beijing are actually taking major actions because they've actually seen a resurgence of cases. They went well over 50 days without any case, and over the weekend, of course, a market in Beijing, talking about the Jinfadi seafood supermarket, actually brought about, so they traced new cases there, 49 new cases there, of which 36 were linked to the Jinfadi market. And at the moment, the market and 10 residential neighborhoods have been shut down. And the second market, the Yukandong market in Haidin, they've traced an asymptomatic patient to that particular market. So right now, Beijing are beginning to press the red alert button again. And after months and months of cases not being in China, and those cases that were actually recorded in China were from people coming into China and not people in China, now we've seen a resurgence of COVID-19 again in that place.
It's such a frustratingly difficult outbreak to control and to manage, because as Mr. Wilson was saying, and you reported, Aaron, there was a similar incident in Japan as well. Just when you think you've seen the back of it, more fresh cases reoccur. And South Korea as well, right? With people going from nightclub to nightclub. It's really very worrying.
Dr. Abati, and I just wanted to chip in this, and that's why we should all try to learn from New Zealand what Jacinda Ardern is doing. Yeah, true. It's been over 28 days down the line now. What is that lady doing? And that lady has constantly...
They locked down early.
Yeah.
They put it to the body early.
What is that lady doing?
But the thing to note about your report from China is that China responded swiftly and immediately locked down that southern part of Beijing that is affected, and declared what they call a wartime emergency measure. And I think that that's a lesson to be learned by other countries. When you ease the lockdown, and then you find new clusters, as they have found in the southern part of Beijing, it's important for government to respond immediately. Households were locked down, shops were locked down, restaurants were closed almost immediately.
And Doctor, to add to that, in terms of quick response and rapid response, they said as soon as this was actually detected, 70,000 tests were conducted, of which 59 came back positive. 70,000 tests were conducted, and just 59 came back positive. And that's to show how far and how forward-thinking this particular government is in nipping this COVID-19 in the bud.
Yeah, but a lockdown in the Chinese context is different from other countries because of the peculiarities of the Chinese system of governance. Let's just leave it at that.
Anyway, one thing you must know about that testing that was carried out in Jinfadi is that, look, at the end of the day, they said the strain of the virus that was detected was a strain that was a variant that was imported from Europe. So when I read that, I was a bit amused. This is China now trying to say, look, what we have seen here in Beijing was brought in from Europe.
And are we really certain about this Chinese 70,000 tests? I mean,
well, that's what they're claiming right now.
I look at that with the corner of my eyes. Just like the way I look at the fact that Zoom doesn't give you encryption any longer now because you're not paying for the calls. So, so I look at it with a corner. 70,000 tests just like that in China.
That's what the Chinese authorities are claiming, that in a matter of days they were able to conduct 70,000 tests, especially and concentrating it in that that southern region of Beijing, and 59 of those came back positive. And they are clear, and they've done a lot of contact tracing, and they've been able to try to isolate these particular people and quarantine them.
Well, I don't know whether, you took a look at what is happening in the United States, where the numbers have been climbing in 22 states, and it's getting really more serious than had been imagined. Yeah,
we actually started with that, and just a quick recap on some of the places, like we said, in the U.S. As we look at the global figures, let's take a look at the global figures before I actually just do a quick recap on the U.S. On what's going on in the U.S. Because at the moment, when we look at the global figures from the Johns Hopkins University data, 7,914,866 by tomorrow. The number of confirmed cases of COVID-19 will certainly cross the 8 million mark, give or take. And at the moment, global deaths are 433,472 at the moment, with the U.S. still the highest, around 115,732, and 42,332 are the number of deaths in Brazil. We mentioned that the U.S. are beginning to see numbers actually rise in key areas. We mentioned Florida, we mentioned Texas, we mentioned Alabama, we mentioned Alaska, Arizona, North and South Carolina. These are some of the places that are actually heavy. Of course, California and quite a number of states are beginning to see a major rise, and they're attributing it to the Memorial Day holiday celebrations over the course of the weekend.
Well, and in terms of attitude, I mean, people are still flocking to the beaches in Florida.
Exactly. To celebrate the Memorial Day. They are damning the consequences, and this is what we spoke about, that self-responsibility is the key in some of these places, and in terms of dealing with COVID-19, you need to take your destiny into your own hands, because right now some people are careless, or some people will care the less about COVID-19, and they might just be asymptomatic and spread it to other people.
Real quickly, it's not all bad news. In New York, the death rate is going down, the lowest ever, just 23 deaths reported in the last 24 hours. And in the UK also, we understand that the fatality rate is also decreasing. We hope that there will be more of such, good news on COVID-19.
I wanted us to quickly look at Brazil, Aaron. How is Jair Bolsonaro doing? Because Latin America is
it's almost getting, it's literally spiraling out of control. At the moment, they are, of course, without a doubt, the second most infected country in the world after the U.S., with 867,624, and recording over 43,000 deaths at the moment. As of this morning, it shows that Brazil are not getting a grip of this, and it will only get worse. And those experts in Latin America that are keeping an eye watch in Latin America are saying that at the moment, the number, the 43,000, is even still underreported. That's not the true amount of those that have died of COVID-19. And when you begin to hear things like this, it becomes very, very scary. Jair Bolsonaro, if there is a catastrophe or a cataclysm in Brazil, he will be held personally responsible, and posterity might never forgive him.
Well, thank you very much, Aaron.
All right.
Thank you very much.